My name is Donna Mercer. And the room went silent so fast I could suddenly hear the ice shifting inside champagne glasses. 1 second, the violinists were playing softly beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Belmont Grand Ballroom in Nashville. The next, Vanessa stood up. "My stepdaughter," she announced calmly, lifting her champagne flute toward the crowd of nearly 200 guests, "is marrying this man for access to family money." A nervous laugh escaped somewhere near the back tables. Then silence again. The kind that suffocates a room. Welcome back to Revenge Story HQ, where family betrayal, hidden secrets, and emotional revenge stories unfold. If you enjoy shocking twists, manipulation, public humiliation, and powerful comebacks, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from. Now, let's go back to the night my stepmother tried to humiliate me at my luxury wedding. Without realizing, I had already found the hidden folder that could destroy the entire family. I stood frozen halfway down the aisle in a white satin gown that suddenly felt too tight around my ribs. My bouquet trembled slightly in my hands. Across from me, Ethan's grip loosened around my fingers. Not because he believed her, because he knew exactly what she was doing. Phones slowly rose around the ballroom like weapons. Recording. Always recording. Vanessa smiled carefully, like a woman giving a heartfelt speech at a charity fundraiser instead of detonating my wedding in public. "You all deserve the truth before this marriage happens," she continued softly. "Especially after what Donna has hidden from this family." A whisper moved through the guests. Hidden? I felt my pulse begin hammering in my throat. 10 minutes earlier, I'd been standing outside the ballroom doors while bridesmaids adjusted my veil. 10 minutes earlier, my father had kissed my forehead with shaking lips and whispered, "Let's just get through today peacefully." At the time, I thought he was emotional. Now I realized he'd been terrified. Vanessa slowly walked toward the center aisle, heels clicking against marble floors. Perfect posture. Perfect makeup. Perfect performance. That was always her gift. Not cruelty. Control. I didn't want— My maid of honor, Claire, slowly lowered her eyes. And that was the exact moment I knew. She already knew about this. My stomach dropped. Vanessa continued before anyone could process the accusation. "Did she tell you about the bankruptcy filings?" Another wave of murmuring spread across the ballroom. Someone near the back gasped quietly. I looked at Ethan. He stayed calm. Too calm. Which scared me more. "Donna," Vanessa said gently, almost maternally, "Sweetheart, I begged you not to do this." Sweetheart. God, I hated when she used that word. Because everyone else heard concern. But I heard ownership. The photographers had stopped taking wedding photos. Instead, they were photographing humiliation. Meaning. I could feel heat crawling into my face as guests avoided eye contact. A woman near the front subtly pulled her chair closer to another guest and whispered behind her hand. My father remained seated at the family table beneath the enormous floral arrangements, pale and motionless. Not defending me. Not stopping her. Just staring downward at his folded hands. That hurt more than Vanessa's speech ever could. "Dad," I said weakly. He didn't answer. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "I protected this family for years," she said. But Donna refuses to understand that some people only see the Mercer name as opportunity. Ethan finally stepped forward. "That's enough." His voice cut sharply through the ballroom. Controlled. Measured. Dangerous. Vanessa smiled at him. "You know," she said quietly, "fraud investigators usually try harder not to look suspicious before weddings." A few guests actually laughed nervously. I stopped breathing. Because suddenly everything connected. The canceled vendors. The anonymous rumors. The strange calls. The whispers during my bridal shower. She orchestrated all of it. Not to stop the wedding. To destroy us publicly. And, the worst part? She looked completely believable doing it. That's when my phone buzzed inside my bouquet ribbon. 3 vibrations. Unknown number. My hands shook as I pulled it free. One image. That was all. A photograph. My father's office. A hidden folder open on his laptop. Black screen. White text. Donna, do not share. And underneath the photo, one message. She lied about everything. I looked up slowly. Vanessa was already watching me, smiling, like she knew exactly what was inside that folder. And for the first time in my life, I realized my stepmother wasn't panicking tonight. She was cornered. And desperate people are the most dangerous. The first thing Vanessa removed from our house was the smell. Not furniture, not photographs. The smell. 3 weeks after my mother died, the vanilla candles disappeared from every room in the Mercer estate. My mother burned them constantly. Kitchen, bedroom, bathrooms, even the hallway near the staircase overlooking the Nashville hills. After the funeral, the house still smelled faintly like vanilla and old books and lavender lotion. Then one afternoon, I came home from school and everything smelled like expensive roses. Sharp roses. Cold roses. Vanessa's perfume. I remember standing near the foyer staircase, staring at the silver candle tray my mother used every winter. Empty. That was the first moment something inside me felt wrong. But grief makes you ignore your instincts. Especially at 16. Vanessa arrived slowly. Carefully. Like someone entering a church after a disaster. At first, she was just my father's friend from the foundation board. Then she became the woman organizing casseroles after the funeral. Then she became the woman answering my father's phone calls because he's too overwhelmed right now. Then somehow, she became permanent. I used to wake up at night hearing my father crying through the walls. Not loudly. The kind of crying people do when they think nobody can hear them. My father had built hotels across Tennessee and Kentucky from almost nothing. People described him as powerful, intimidating, brilliant. But grief hollowed him out. And Vanessa noticed immediately. That was what made her dangerous. She understood weakness before anyone else did. She learned everyone's emotional pressure points within weeks. My father needed stability. Relatives needed organization. Board members needed reassurance. And I needed someone to tell me life would eventually stop hurting. Vanessa became all those things, at least temporarily. She started attending school events, cooking dinners, organizing charity galas my mother used to run. Even our relatives praised her. She's keeping this family together. She's saving your father. She didn't have to step up like this. I heard those phrases constantly, until eventually, I started repeating them too. The night I first called her Mom, she cried. Actual tears. At least they looked real. I was 17. It was raining outside. My father had missed another school recital because of work, and Vanessa sat beside me in the kitchen afterward while thunder shook the windows. You don't have to force yourself, she told me softly. I know, I whispered. But I did force myself. Because grief makes replacements feel necessary. And because loneliness can make manipulation feel like love. She hugged me tightly that night. Too tightly. I remember that now. At the time, I thought it meant safety. Years later, I would realize Vanessa never replaced my mother emotionally. She replaced her structurally. That was the difference. By the second year, family photographs started disappearing from the walls. Not all at once. One at a time. Subtle enough that nobody questioned it. Then came the financial conversations. The legal meetings. The estate discussions. Always behind closed doors. Whenever I walked into rooms unexpectedly, conversations stopped. Papers disappeared. My father would suddenly smile too quickly. Adult business, he'd say. Vanessa would pour wine calmly beside him, watching me carefully, studying reactions. I didn't understand it then, but she was measuring how observant I was becoming. And unfortunately for her, I inherited more from my mother than she realized. I inherited patience. The night I truly began questioning Vanessa happened almost 4 years after my mother's death. I came downstairs late looking for water and heard voices inside my father's office. The door wasn't fully closed. Vanessa was speaking softly. Donna trusts me completely, she said. A pause. Then, she has no idea how vulnerable she actually is. I stopped breathing. My father sounded exhausted. Vanessa. She's emotional, Vanessa continued calmly. That makes her easy to influence right now. Something cold slid through my stomach. I backed away from the office before they could hear me. But I didn't sleep that night, because for the first time, I realized Vanessa never entered our family because she loved broken people. She entered because broken people are easier to control. By the time I turned 26, the Mercer estate no longer felt like a home. It felt like a boardroom pretending to be a family. Every dinner became a strategy, meeting disguised by candlelight and expensive wine. Vanessa sat at the head of the table most nights now. Not my father. That change happened so gradually nobody acknowledged it aloud. But everyone noticed, especially me. The Mercer mansion overlooked the Nashville hills, all glass walls and imported marble and carefully landscaped gardens that looked beautiful from a distance and emotionally lifeless up close. That was Vanessa's style. Beautiful things that felt cold. One Friday evening, I arrived late after work and immediately sensed tension inside the dining room. My father avoided eye contact. Vanessa smiled too quickly. 3 legal folders sat beside her wine glass. Perfect timing, she said warmly. We were discussing future protections. Protections. That word again. I hated that word. I sat slowly across from them. For who? I asked. Vanessa exchanged a glance with my father. That's exactly what we're trying to determine, she replied. The air shifted instantly. My father cleared his throat. There's been discussion about restructuring portions of the estate. Restructuring. Another word wealthy families use when they don't want to say control. I stared at him. What does that mean? It means, Vanessa interrupted smoothly, your father wants to make sure the company survives long term. The company, not the family. The company. I suddenly realized they spoke about inheritance the same way investors discuss risk management. Emotionlessly. Strategically. Like people were assets instead of human beings. Vanessa poured herself more wine carefully. I just think emotional decisions can become dangerous when large amounts of money are involved. There it was. Not subtle anymore. I set my fork down. You mean me? Donna. My father started. No, I said quietly. Let her finish. Vanessa leaned back calmly. I think you're sensitive right now. That sentence used to work on me. Not anymore. Because sensitive was Vanessa's favorite word whenever someone noticed manipulation. I looked around the dining room. My mother's favorite paintings were gone now. So were the family vacation photographs. Even the piano had disappeared months earlier. Vanessa erased people in stages. That's how she operated. Slow enough nobody fought back until it was too late. I'm not asking for anything, I said carefully. Of course not, Vanessa replied. And that's why we're trying to protect you. Protect. Again. Every controlling person hides behind protection eventually. Dinner ended shortly afterward. But as I walked upstairs, I overheard Vanessa speaking quietly near the kitchen. She's becoming harder to predict. I froze. Then another voice answered. Male. Come. That's because she's finally paying attention. I turned the corner, and for the first time, I saw Ethan Cole standing in my house. I met Ethan Cole at a charity fraud audit, which, honestly, should have warned me exactly how our relationship was going to end up. The Mercer Foundation hosted those galas every winter inside a restored Nashville theater covered in gold trim, velvet curtains, and fake generosity. Wealthy people drank champagne beneath crystal chandeliers while pretending silent auctions solved poverty. Vanessa loved those events because they gave her an audience. She floated through the ballroom in a silver dress that shimmered every time cameras flashed, touching arms lightly, smiling softly, performing kindness with terrifying precision. People adore her. That was the problem. By then, my father's health had already started declining. Nothing dramatic yet, just exhaustion, forgetfulness, longer silences at dinner. Vanessa had gradually begun speaking for him during business meetings. At first, everyone called it helping. Then, eventually, no one questioned it at all. That night, I was standing near the donor wall pretending to care about a silent auction, painting when I heard someone behind me say, "Half these numbers are fake." I turned around, and there he was, dark suit, notie, holding a bourbon glass he barely touched. Ethan. He wasn't staring at me. He was staring at the foundation expense report on the wall. I blinked. "What?" "The outreach percentages," he said calmly. "They're inflated." I almost laughed. "You figured that out from one glance?" He finally looked at me. And for the first time in years, someone looked at me like I was a person instead of a responsibility. Occupational hazard. Her smile remained perfectly polished, but her eyes sharpened, like she'd just spotted smoke in another room. Later that evening, Ethan and I sat near the balcony overlooking the city, while guests danced below us. For the first time in years, conversation felt easy. Not managed. Not strategic. Easy. "You hate these events," he said. I looked at him carefully. "How can you tell?" "You apologize every time someone rich speaks to you." I actually laughed. A real laugh. Not the careful, polite ones I'd learned around Vanessa. And somehow that scared me, because I realized how long it had been since I felt emotionally relaxed around anyone. Then Vanessa appeared beside us holding 2 champagne glasses. Perfect timing. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. "Donna," she said sweetly, "you disappeared." Then she looked directly at Ethan. "And you are?" "Ethan Cole." He stood politely. "Financial investigations." I watched it happen instantly. The shift. Vanessa's expression didn't change outwardly, but something behind her eyes tightened, like a vault door locking. "How interesting," she said smoothly, then handed me a champagne glass without looking away from him. "What kind of investigations?" "Mostly corporate fraud." Silence. Tiny. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. So did Ethan. Vanessa recovered immediately. "Well," she laughed softly. "Good thing our family is boring." Ethan smiled politely. "Yes," he said. "I'm sure." That was the exact moment she started hating him. I didn't realize it then. But later, I would replay that conversation over and over again. Because Ethan did something nobody else ever did around Vanessa. He observed her. Most people reacted to her, admired her, followed her, feared disappointing her. But Ethan watched her. Carefully. Like he already sensed something underneath the performance. And Vanessa noticed that immediately. The passive-aggressive comments started a week later. At dinner. At brunch. At family events. Tiny little cuts disguised as concern. "He's very ambitious, isn't he?" Financial investigators usually make enemies. Donna's always been too trusting. Then, eventually, some men become interested in powerful families for the wrong reasons. My father never challenged her. That hurt worse. He'd just stare quietly into his wine glass while Vanessa smiled sympathetically beside him like she was protecting me from danger. The worst part? For a while, I wondered if she was right. That's what manipulation does. It makes you question your own happiness. One night after dinner, Ethan and I sat inside his car outside my apartment while rain tapped softly against the windshield. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then he asked quietly, "Has your stepmother always controlled every room she walks into?" I stared out the window. "She thinks she's protecting the family." "No," he said gently. "She thinks she owns it." That sentence stayed with me, because deep down, I already knew it was true. I just wasn't emotionally ready to admit it yet. Then my father collapsed 2 months later. Everything changed after that. The official explanation was exhaustion, stress, minor cardiac complications. But suddenly Vanessa controlled everything completely. Appointments, medications, business meetings, estate discussions, phone access, even dinner schedules. The mansion became quieter, heavier. Like everyone inside it had started walking carefully without knowing why. And Vanessa thrived in that silence. One evening I arrived unexpectedly and found her inside my father's office alone. The desk drawer was open. Stacks of legal paperwork covered the table. She shut the drawer immediately when she saw me. "Donna," she said smoothly. "You startled me. I noticed my father's signature on several documents. What's all this?" "Estate restructuring." She smiled. "Just protecting the family." That word again. Protecting. I hated the way she used it, like fear wrapped in silk. Then she stepped closer and adjusted my necklace gently like I was still a child. "You should really be careful with Ethan," she whispered. My stomach tightened. "Why?" Her smile never moved. "Because men who investigate fraud usually assume everyone is guilty." Then she walked past me, perfume lingering behind her. Leaving me alone in the office staring at paperwork I suddenly wanted desperately to read. That night, for the first time in my life, I wondered if Vanessa was afraid. And if she was, I needed to know why. Rain hammered against my apartment windows hard enough to make the glass tremble. The city lights below Nashville blurred into streaks of gold and white while Ethan stood in my kitchen rolling up his sleeves beside the stove, half focused on dinner and half focused on me pretending not to panic. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Third message in 10 minutes. I stared at it without opening it. Ethan noticed immediately. "You're doing that thing again," he said. "What thing?" "The thing where your face goes blank before bad news." Another buzz. This time there was an attachment. PDF files. My stomach tightened. I opened the message and instantly wished I hadn't. Wire transfer records. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moving through shell companies I'd never heard of. Mercer Hospitality Holdings, VH Consulting, Blackwater Property Group. My throat dried instantly. At first I thought it was fake. Then I saw my father's signature. And Vanessa's. The message underneath simply read, "She's been stealing from him for years." The apartment suddenly felt colder. Ethan slowly turned the stove off. "What is it?" I handed him the phone. His expression changed almost immediately. Not shock. Recognition. That terrified me more. He scrolled silently through the files while thunder rattled the windows again. Then he asked quietly, "Donna, why does your stepmother have authorization over all your father's private accounts?" "She manages the estate." "She manages everything," he corrected softly. Another message appeared, this time with photographs. Luxury condos. A penthouse in Chicago. A property in Aspen. All purchased under LLCs connected to Vanessa. Purchase dates spanning nearly 8 years. 8 years. My hands started shaking. "No, y whisperat." Ethan kept reading. His jaw tightened slowly. I recognized that expression. It was the same face he made during investigations. Cold. Focused. Dangerously calm. "You need to sit down," he said softly. That sentence scared me more than yelling would have. I sat at the kitchen island while rainwater crawled down the windows behind us. Ethan opened another attachment. A spreadsheet. Transfers. Corporate distributions. Property taxes. Then highlighted one line. Monthly withdrawals from my late mother's memorial trust. My chest tightened immediately. No. The trust had been created after my mother died. Vanessa cried during the signing ceremony, said she would protect my mother's legacy. I remembered hugging her afterward. God. I actually hugged her. Ethan looked at me carefully. Donna. She wouldn't do this. You don't believe that. I looked away immediately, because deep down, I did. That was the horrifying part. Then Ethan found something worse. A denied audit request. Submitted 3 years earlier. Requested by my father. My stomach dropped. He knew, I whispered. No, Ethan said carefully. He suspected. But that wasn't the worst part. At the bottom of the audit request was a handwritten note. Vanessa insists Donna must never see this. The room suddenly felt impossible to breathe in, because for the first time in my life, I realized my family wasn't protecting me. They were hiding things from me. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One final message. She knows Ethan is looking. And underneath it, be careful who attends your wedding. 3 weeks later, Ethan proposed to me on a rooftop overlooking downtown Nashville. And for exactly 11 minutes, I believed I was finally safe. The skyline glowed gold beneath us, while soft jazz drifted through hidden rooftop speakers. Wind lifted the edges of my dress as Ethan knelt beside candlelight with shaking hands. Actual shaking hands. That's how I knew he loved me. Not because he said perfect things. Because he looked terrified to lose me. Donna Mercer, he whispered. I know your family makes everything complicated. I laughed through tears instantly. But I don't want one peaceful part of my life that doesn't include you. Then he opened the ring box. And for one perfect second, none of the chaos mattered anymore. I said yes before he finished asking. People at nearby tables applauded softly. A violinist somewhere downstairs started playing. The city looked beautiful beneath us. And then my phone rang. Vanessa. I ignored it. 30 seconds later, my father called. That scared me enough to answer. His voice sounded weak. Sweetheart, he said carefully. There's something we need to discuss before you announce anything publicly. My happiness immediately dimmed. I looked at Ethan. He already knew. Somehow he already knew. What is it? Long silence. Then, Vanessa thinks the engagement may create unnecessary complications right now. There it was. Not congratulations. Not happiness. Complications. Ethan slowly looked away toward the skyline. I could physically feel his disappointment. My father kept talking quietly. Maybe postpone public announcements until after the restructuring finishes. That word again. Restructuring. Always restructuring. Always paperwork. Always delays. I suddenly realized something horrifying. No milestone in my life had ever belonged fully to me. There was always approval required first. Vanessa always found a reason to interfere. And somehow I always allowed it. Not this time. No, I said softly. Silence. Then my father sighed. And for the first time, he sounded tired of defending her.
Donna.
We're announcing it. I hung up before he answered. Ethan watched me carefully. You okay? I nodded immediately. Too quickly. Because I wasn't. The sabotage started 48 hours later. First, the florist canceled unexpectedly. Then the ballroom suddenly became unavailable. Then my bridal shower invitations mysteriously leaked online beside anonymous rumors about Ethan being investigated financially. My cousin Claire called pretending concern. I'm sure it's fake, she said. Which is exactly what guilty people say before pretending innocence. At family dinners, conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Relatives suddenly avoided eye contact. One aunt even asked quietly if Ethan had told me everything yet. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Every morning brought another problem. Another cancellation. Another rumor. Another invisible hand pulling strings behind curtains. And every single trail somehow led back to Vanessa. But she remained perfectly calm. That was the terrifying part. At brunch, one Sunday, she held my hand gently across the table and smiled sadly. I just don't want you rushing into something dangerous. Dangerous. Like love itself was the threat. Then 3 days before the wedding, everything changed. My father invited me to the mansion, unexpectedly. Vanessa wasn't home. The house felt strangely quiet.
Dark.
I found him asleep upstairs inside the bedroom recliner while medication bottles rested beside untouched tea. He looked older than I'd ever seen him.
Smaller too.
That broke something inside me. I covered him with a blanket gently, then went downstairs toward his office. The desk lamp was still on. Papers everywhere. Laptop open. I should have walked away. Instead, I saw the folder. Black desktop folder. Simple white text. Donna, do not share. My stomach dropped instantly. I opened it, and my entire world changed. Jazz music played softly through the office speakers while rain tapped against the mansion windows. The room smelled like old leather and bourbon. My father's desk lamp cast a dull gold glow across stacks of legal folders and unfinished paperwork. And right there, on the laptop screen, was the folder Vanessa never wanted me to see. Donna, do not share. My hands shook before I even opened it, because deep down, I already knew nothing good lived inside that folder. The first file was audio, dated 8 months earlier. I clicked play. Static crackled softly. Then Vanessa's voice filled the room.
Cold.
Controlled. Unrecognizable from the woman who baked holiday pies and hugged grieving relatives. If Donna marries him, he'll uncover everything. My blood froze. My father answered weakly. She loves him. And love makes people reckless. Silence. Then Vanessa, again. You promised you'd protect this family.
Protect.
Always that word. Except now I finally understood what she meant. Not protecting us. Protecting herself. I opened another recording. Vanessa speaking to someone else. Possibly Claire. He's already asking questions about the Harbor Hotel.
Pause.
If Ethan gets access to those trust documents, we lose control completely. Lose control. Not lose money. Not lose family. Control. That's what all of this had really been about. My chest tightened painfully. I clicked through more files. Trust restructuring drafts. Asset transfers. Hidden LLC ownership records. Documents connected to my mother's estate. And buried underneath all of it, a scanned letter from my father.
And signed.
Never sent.
Donna.
If you are reading this, it means I waited too long to stop her. I stopped breathing. The letter continued. Vanessa convinced me the transfers were temporary, then necessary, then irreversible. Tears blurred my vision instantly. She said she was protecting the family after my health declined. By the time I realized how much control she had taken, I no longer knew how to undo it. My father knew, maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to be afraid. Enough to hide evidence. Enough to fail me. That hurt worse than the fraud itself. Then another file caught my attention. Security footage. Time-stamped 2 weeks earlier. Vanessa inside the study speaking to Claire.
No audio.
But Claire handed her something. An envelope. Vanessa opened it. And smiled. Then the next clip showed her shredding papers afterward.
I zoomed in.
Bankruptcy filings. Ethan's name printed across the top. Fake documents. Manufactured evidence. My stomach turned violently. She'd been planning this. Not just sabotage.
Public destruction.
Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I nearly dropped it. One message. She plans to expose Ethan publicly at the wedding. Underneath it, she thinks humiliation will make you obedient again. I looked around the empty office slowly. Every family photograph suddenly felt fake. Every holiday memory contaminated. Every hug manipulated. Then footsteps creaked upstairs. My father waking up. I panicked instantly and copied the folder contents onto a flash drive beside the desk. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped it twice. The office door moved slightly. I slammed the laptop shut. My father stood there looking exhausted.
Confused.
Then he saw the open desk drawer, and his entire face fell.
Donna.
Not anger, not denial.
Defeat.
That scared me more. I stood slowly, holding the flash drive inside my fist. How long? I whispered. He looked away immediately. That was my answer. My voice cracked. You knew. I tried to fix it. No, I said quietly. You tried to survive it. That silence afterward felt unbearable. Then he whispered something I'll never forget. She wasn't always like this. I stared at him in disbelief. Even now, even after everything, he was still protecting her. That's what emotional control does. It rewrites reality slowly until survival feels like loyalty. I backed away toward the hallway. My father looked terrified suddenly. Donna, listen to me carefully. I stopped. And then he said the sentence that changed everything. If Vanessa realizes you opened that folder, she will not stop. Not might.
Will.
I left the mansion shaking. and sitting in my car outside under pouring rain, I finally understood something horrifying. This wedding was no longer about love. It was about exposure. And Vanessa was preparing for war. For the next 72 hours, Ethan and I barely slept. Our apartment transformed into something between a legal bunker and a crime investigation wall. Financial records covered the dining table. Printed emails lined the kitchen counters. Flash drives, trust documents, bank statements, property transfers.
Audiotranskripts.
Every surface held another piece of Vanessa's carefully hidden life. Rainstorms rolled through Nashville almost every night that week. The weather felt cinematic in the worst possible way. Like the city itself knew something ugly was coming. Ethan barely spoke while working. That scared me too. Because calm people become terrifying when they stop pretending things are fixable. At 2 a.m, I found him staring silently at transfer records beside cold coffee and unopened takeout containers. "What?" I whispered. He rubbed his eyes slowly. "She's smarter than I thought." That sentence chilled me instantly. Ethan explained everything carefully afterward. Vanessa hadn't stolen recklessly. She'd buried transactions through layered holding companies connected to hospitality investments. Most people would never notice. But she made one mistake. Greed grows careless eventually. And Vanessa had started moving larger amounts after my father's health declined. She thought nobody would challenge her, Ethan said, because emotionally nobody ever had. That hurt because it was true. The next morning, Ethan introduced me to a forensic accountant named Lydia Cho. Sharp eyes, short gray hair, no patience for emotional denial. She reviewed the files silently for almost an hour, then finally leaned back in her chair. "This is criminal." Hearing someone say it out loud made my stomach twist. Criminal. Not misunderstanding. Not family conflict. Not complicated finances. Criminal. Lydia uncovered something even worse 3 hours later. The Nashville Harbor Hotel, the property my mother partially owned, had been leveraged secretly against private loans. If those loans defaulted, the hotel would legally transfer into a holding company controlled entirely by Vanessa, meaning my inheritance had quietly become collateral. I physically felt sick. "She planned this years ago," Lydia whispered. Then Ethan found another hidden detail. Vanessa had been preparing fake financial reports about Ethan. Not random rumors. Professional-looking fraud allegations. Designed specifically for public exposure. That's when I realized the wedding itself was the trap, not the target, the stage. She wanted public humiliation, public pressure, public emotional collapse, because shame works better with witnesses. I sat silently at the dining table while thunder rolled outside again. Then Ethan crouched beside me. "You can still cancel this." I looked at him carefully.
No, y whisperat.
His expression tightened slightly. "You're sure?" That's when I realized something important. Vanessa expected fear. She expected tears. She expected obedience. What she would never expect was preparation. So we prepared. Quietly.
Carefully.
Like building a courtroom case before trial. Lydia organized evidence chronologically. Ethan prepared copies. I contacted my mother's former estate attorney secretly. And what he revealed nearly destroyed me. My mother had originally structured most of her holdings to transfer directly to me at 30. But amendments appeared after her death. Amendments signed during my father's breakdown period. Amendments Vanessa supervised. The attorney's voice lowered carefully over the phone. "I always suspected your father was manipulated emotionally." Manipulated emotionally. Such a gentle phrase for destruction. The night before the wedding, our apartment looked like a war room. Stacks of labeled folders. Projector cables.
Audio backups.
Witness statements. Legal affidavits. And still, I couldn't stop shaking. Not because I feared Vanessa. Because I feared what exposure would destroy. Families don't collapse cleanly. They rot publicly. And tomorrow, mine would. At 6 the next morning, a delivery arrived. Gold envelope. Heavy cream paper. Vanessa's handwriting across the front. Elegant.
Perfect.
Terrifying. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten bridal letter. For a second, I actually hoped it was an apology.
God.
Even after everything, part of me still wanted a mother. Instead, the letter read,
Donna.
"Some women confuse rebellion with strength. Today will remind you who truly protects this family."
No signature. No worms.
Just control disguised as wisdom. And underneath the letter was a printed copy of Ethan's fake bankruptcy allegations. I stared at them for a long time, then slowly handed them to Ethan. He read silently, then smiled. Actually smiled. "Good," he said softly. I blinked. What? She's overconfident now. That frightened me, because Ethan only sounded that calm when he already knew how something ended. Then he reached into the evidence box beside the couch and handed me the microphone remote for the ballroom projector. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "Let her speak first." The ballroom looked beautiful enough to fool strangers into thinking this was a love story. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead like suspended stars while violinists played softly near the marble staircase. White roses covered the altar. Champagne glasses shimmered beneath candlelight. Nearly 200 guests filled the room in black tuxedos and designer gowns. And every single one of them was about to witness my family collapse in real time. I stood at the entrance gripping my bouquet hard enough to bend the stems. My wedding dress suddenly felt heavier than armor. Claire stood near the front row pretending to cry already. Her phone sat partially hidden beside her clutch purse. Recording. Of course. Vanessa sat beside my father in deep emerald silk, perfectly composed, hands folded elegantly in her lap, like she wasn't preparing to detonate the room. Then the doors opened. Every head turned toward me. The violinist softened. And for one dangerous second, I almost forgot everything. Ethan stood beneath the floral arch waiting for me in a black tuxedo.
Calm.
Steady. Safe. His eyes found mine immediately. And somehow, I could breathe again. I walked down the aisle slowly, while cameras flashed softly around us. Guests smiled. Some whispered. Some looked nervous already. Because tension has a scent. And this room reeked of it. Halfway down the aisle, I saw Vanessa lean toward Claire. Claire nodded subtly, then unlocked her phone. My stomach tightened instantly. Ethan noticed too. His expression changed almost invisibly. Tiny shift. Tiny warning. Then I reached the altar. Ethan took my hands carefully. They were freezing. "You okay?" he whispered.
No. Y whisper to Nashville.
A flicker of anger crossed his face.
Not at me.
At them. The officiant began speaking. Something about love. Commitment. Trust. Ironically, then it happened. A champagne glass clinked loudly across the ballroom. Sharp. Precise. Intentional. The room fell silent immediately. Vanessa stood slowly from her chair. Still smiling. Still elegant. Still terrifying. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "But before the ceremony continues, there are things this family deserves to know." My pulse slowed instead of speeding up, because suddenly, everything was happening exactly as Ethan predicted. Guests exchanged confused glances. Phones quietly lifted. Recording. Always recording. My father looked panicked immediately. Vanessa, but she touched his arm gently. "Please." Then she looked directly at me. The performance began. I stayed silent for months because I didn't want to embarrass Donna publicly.
Lie.
But Ethan Cole has manipulated this family from the beginning. Murmurs spread instantly. Claire lowered her eyes dramatically. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh my God." Vanessa continued calmly. "He inserted himself into our finances, isolated Donna emotionally, and now intends to marry her while hiding severe financial instability." Then she lifted a folder. The fake bankruptcy documents. Exactly like the copies mailed to relatives earlier that week.
Gasps.
Whispers. Phones rising higher. I looked at Ethan. He didn't move. Didn't react. Didn't defend himself. That frightened Vanessa slightly. I could see it. Because manipulators expect emotional chaos, not stillness. Vanessa turned toward the guests. I begged Donna to slow down. I begged her to protect herself.
Protect.
Always that word. Then she sighed sadly, like a grieving mother. But unfortunately, love can blind intelligent women. The audience shifted emotionally immediately. That's what public humiliation does. People don't wait for truth. They wait for confidence. And Vanessa sounded incredibly confident. Then my father stood abruptly. Vanessa, enough. But his voice lacked authority. Because years of surrender had weakened him. Vanessa ignored him completely. She deserves to know the man she's marrying is bankrupt. Claire finally spoke up.
Softly.
Carefully timed. I didn't want this to happen publicly.
God.
Even her voice sounded rehearsed. Then Vanessa stepped closer toward the altar.
Toward me. Toward Ethan.
And lowered her voice just enough to sound intimate. Donna, sweetheart, you still have time to walk away. That sentence almost broke me. Not because I believed her. Because once upon a time, I would have. Then Ethan squeezed my hand once. Tiny pressure. Tiny signal. He leaned toward me slightly. And whispered one word.
Now.
The ballroom held its breath as I stepped toward Vanessa slowly.
No screaming. No tears. No panic.
That confused her immediately. Because she expected emotional collapse. Not calm. I handed my bouquet quietly to the bridesmaid beside me. Then reached for the microphone. Vanessa's smile flickered. Just slightly. Donna, she whispered warningly. Too late. I turned toward the guests. Toward the raised phones. Toward the silent ballroom, waiting to decide who deserved humiliation. Then I spoke calmly. My stepmother is right about one thing. The room went still. I should have paid attention sooner. Vanessa blinked. Not the direction she expected. I continued softly. For years, I believed loyalty meant silence. My father lowered his head instantly. And every time something felt wrong, I convinced myself family meant enduring it. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then I looked directly at Vanessa. But what they didn't know, I pressed the projector remote, was that I already opened the hidden folder. The ballroom projector flickered alive behind us instantly. A spreadsheet appeared across the massive white wedding screen. Bank transfers. Shell companies. Property acquisitions. Vanessa's expression changed immediately. Not fear yet. Recognition. The dangerous kind. Guests began whispering louder. What is that? Oh my God. Claire visibly froze. Then Ethan stepped beside the projector table calmly. Courtroom energy. Exactly like we planned. These are financial transfers connected to Mercer family trusts over the last 8 years, he said evenly. Vanessa recovered quickly. This is absurd. Then another slide appeared. Luxury condo purchases. Hidden LLCs. Transfer authorizations. Signed by Vanessa. My father stared at the screen like he couldn't process what he was seeing. That's impossible, someone whispered near the front row. I looked directly at Vanessa. No, I said quietly. What's impossible is how long you got away with it. The room erupted into overlapping whispers. Phones recording openly now. No one hiding it anymore. Then Vanessa laughed softly. Actually laughed. Because manipulators always try confidence first. These documents are being taken completely out of context. I nodded slowly. You're right. Then I pressed the remote again. Audio file. Static crackled softly through ballroom speakers. Then Vanessa's recorded voice filled the room. If Donna marries him, he'll uncover everything. Silence detonated across the ballroom. Vanessa stopped breathing. My father physically stumbled backward into his chair. The recording continued. He's already asking questions about the Harbor Hotel. Claire's face drained completely. And suddenly the room no longer belonged to Vanessa. It belonged to truth. I watched guests slowly shift away from her table, like proximity itself felt dangerous. Then my father whispered, Vanessa? Not angry.
Destroyed.
That's worse. Vanessa stepped forward quickly. That recording is manipulated. I pressed the remote again. Another audio clip. Her voice. Clear this time. She thinks humiliation will make Donna obedient again. The ballroom exploded into gasps. One bridesmaid covered her mouth. Someone near the back muttered,
Jesus Christ.
Vanessa turned toward me fully now. No performance left. Only fury. You ungrateful little. She stopped herself too late. Everyone heard it. That was the moment the mask cracked publicly. I looked at her carefully. You didn't protect this family. My voice shook slightly. Not from fear. From grief. You controlled it. Then Ethan handed me the final document. Vanessa's bridal letter. The gold envelope. Still folded. Still elegant. I held it up slowly. This arrived at my apartment this morning. Vanessa's face went pale instantly. That frightened me more than anger, because she knew exactly what was inside. I unfolded the paper carefully and read it aloud into the microphone. Some women confuse rebellion with strength. The room stayed completely silent. Today will remind you who truly protects this family. I lowered the letter slowly, then looked directly at her. You plan to destroy me on my wedding day. Vanessa finally snapped. You are destroying this family. There it was. The truth. Not money. Not reputation. Control. Everything always came back to control. Then my father stood slowly from his chair. His face looked 20 years older. He stared at Vanessa in horror and asked quietly, What restructuring? The silence after my father's question felt unbearable, because everyone already knew the answer. Vanessa just hadn't realized it yet. She looked around the ballroom desperately, like someone searching for exits inside a burning building. But the room had changed. Completely. People who once admired her now avoided eye contact. Friends stepped backward. Relatives whispered openly. And nobody rushed to defend her. That's the terrifying thing about power built on manipulation. The second proof appears. Loyalty evaporates. Vanessa turned toward my father quickly. Charles, listen to me carefully.
No.
His voice cracked through the ballroom harder than yelling would have. No one had heard him interrupt her in years. Even Vanessa looked startled. My father's hands trembled violently at his sides. You transferred her mother's trust? Vanessa swallowed hard. It was temporary. How much? Silence. That silence answered everything. My father staggered backward slightly. I almost moved toward him instinctively, then stopped. Because for years, I'd been emotionally trained to rescue people who never rescued me. Not anymore. Claire suddenly stood. I didn't know everything, she blurted. Wrong thing to say. The ballroom reacted immediately. Because innocent people don't start with partial denials. Vanessa whipped toward her. Stop talking.
Fear.
Real fear. For the first time all night, Claire looked like she might cry. She told me the transfers were legal. Claire. Vanessa's voice turned deadly quiet. Too late. Guests were already pulling away from their table completely now. Phones recording every second. Someone near the back quietly walked out. Another guest whispered, This is going online. And somehow that made everything feel even more irreversible. Then security entered the ballroom. Not aggressively. Quietly. But their presence changed the oxygen in the room instantly. Vanessa stared at them in disbelief. You called security? Ethan answered calmly.
No.
That meant someone else did. Maybe hotel management. Maybe one of the attorneys. Maybe a guest realizing financial crimes were unfolding live during a wedding ceremony. The head of security approached carefully. Mrs. Mercer. Vanessa laughed once. Sharp. Disbelieving. You cannot seriously think. Then Lydia Cho stepped forward from the guest section holding a folder. The forensic accountant. Quiet. Precise. Terrifying. These documents have already been forwarded to federal investigators. The room collectively inhaled. Federal. Not family drama anymore. Criminal. Vanessa's composure finally shattered. You stupid woman, she hissed at me. There would be nothing left of this family without me. That hurt, because somewhere deep down, part of me still understood her. My father collapsed emotionally after my mother died. The business became unstable. The family fractured. Vanessa stepped into chaos and built herself into the center of it. But somewhere along the way, help became ownership, and ownership became greed. My father removed his wedding ring slowly. The entire ballroom watched him place it on the table beside her untouched champagne glass. Tiny sound, metal against glass. Still one of the loudest things I've ever heard. Vanessa stared at the ring like it physically wounded her. Then finally,
she cried.
Not graceful tears. Not movie tears. Real ones. Messy.
Humiliating.
Human. And somehow that was worse. Because monsters are easy to hate. Broken people are harder. My father looked at me next, and his expression destroyed me. Not because he wanted forgiveness. Because he knew he didn't deserve it. I'm sorry, he whispered. My throat tightened instantly. I failed you. The ballroom disappeared for a second. Just me and him. Years of silence. Years of missed warnings. Years of emotional surrender. And the horrifying truth was, he wasn't weak. He was afraid. Afraid to lose another person after my mother died. So he ignored red flags. Compromised slowly. Surrendered gradually. Until he no longer recognized the life around him. That's how manipulation works. Not all at once. One survival decision at a time. Security escorted Vanessa quietly toward the ballroom exit. Nobody stopped them. Nobody defended her. Claire stayed frozen in her chair, crying silently. And as Vanessa disappeared through the gold ballroom doors, she looked back at me one final time. Not with hatred. Not even anger. But disbelief. Like she genuinely couldn't understand why control no longer worked. Then she was gone. And for the first time in years, the room finally felt quiet. Nobody knew what to do after Vanessa left. The ballroom existed in this surreal emotional limbo where half the guests looked traumatized and the other half looked addicted to the drama they'd just witnessed. The violinists had stopped playing entirely. One champagne tower sat untouched near the dance floor. White roses covered the altar like decorations from another reality. My wedding reality. The one that was supposed to happen before everything exploded. I stood there staring at the ballroom doors long after Vanessa disappeared through them. Then Ethan touched my hand gently. You okay? I laughed once. Actually laughed. Not because anything was funny. Because my nervous system had officially given up understanding the night. I think my wedding turned into a federal investigation. A few nearby guests laughed nervously. The tension cracked slightly. Then something unexpected happened. My 80-year-old Aunt Louise stood slowly from the second row. Tiny woman. Bright blue dress. Walks with a cane. And she started clapping. One soft clap. Then another. Then more guests joined.
Slowly.
Emotionally. Until the entire ballroom filled with applause. Not for the exposure. Not for the humiliation. For survival. I started crying immediately. Real crying this time. Not controlled. Not strategic. Just exhaustion finally escaping my body. Ethan wrapped his arms around me while applause echoed through the ballroom chandeliers. And for the first time all night, I felt safe again. The officiant awkwardly adjusted his tie. Then quietly asked, "Would you still like to continue?"
Everyone looked at me.
200 people waiting for my answer. And suddenly I realized something important. Vanessa spent years teaching me to shrink myself around conflict. To delay happiness. To apologize for existing loudly. If I walked away now, she would still control the ending.
No.
Absolutely not. I wiped my face slowly. Then looked at Ethan. You still want to marry me? He smiled instantly. More than before, honestly. That made the ballroom laugh again.
Soft.
Relieved. Human. So we continued. Not because the night was perfect. Because it wasn't. My father's chair remained empty. Claire quietly left halfway through the ceremony. Several guests still whispered in corners. And somewhere outside that ballroom, my family was collapsing legally and emotionally in real time. But still, we continued. The violinists began playing again softly. The officiant restarted with trembling hands. And when Ethan took my hands this time, they weren't freezing anymore. They were steady, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't performing obedience for love. I was choosing myself publicly. Our vows sounded different after everything. More honest, less polished. When Ethan said, "I will never make you earn safety," I almost lost composure again. And when I whispered, "I'm learning that peace is not the same thing as silence," the ballroom went completely still. Then we kissed beneath crystal chandeliers while guests stood applauding around us. Not because the night was beautiful, because it was real. And honestly, real survives longer than perfection ever does. Later during the reception, I noticed something strange. The ballroom physically felt lighter without Vanessa inside it.
No tensión.
No invisible pressure. No emotional performance controlling every interaction. People laughed naturally. Conversations sounded honest. Even the music felt warmer somehow. That's when I realized something terrifying. Manipulative people don't just control individuals. They control atmospheres. And once they leave, everyone breathes differently. Near midnight, I stepped briefly onto the empty balcony overlooking Nashville. Cold wind moved softly through my hair while distant city lights shimmered below. Ethan joined me quietly. No words at first. Then he handed me a champagne glass. "To surviving your family," he offered. I smiled faintly.
No.
I looked back through the ballroom windows. At the dancing, the laughter, the life continuing, to finally seeing them clearly. And somewhere deep down, I realized revenge stories don't end at exposure. They end with consequences. 6 months later, silence sounded completely different to me. Not lonely, peaceful. Ethan and I spent most weekends at the lake house my mother bought before I was born. The same lake Vanessa once called financially impractical, which now felt almost poetic. Morning fog rolled gently across the water, while wind chimes moved softly near the porch.
No ballroom. No whispers. No performances.
Just quiet. Real quiet. The kind that doesn't demand anything from you. Federal investigators officially indicted Vanessa 3 months after the wedding.
Wire fraud.
Financial conspiracy.
Forgery.
The media loved it, especially because someone leaked ballroom footage online. Millions of views. Comment sections full of strangers calling me brave, which felt strange, because bravery never feels powerful while it's happening. It just feels terrifying. Claire disappeared almost immediately after the investigation began. New city. New number.
No goodbye.
Honestly, that hurt more than I expected. Because betrayal from enemies feels different than betrayal from people who grew up beside you. My father lived alone now in a smaller townhouse outside Nashville. We spoke occasionally. Carefully. Slow healing conversations filled with awkward pauses and things neither of us fully knew how to say. One afternoon, he admitted something quietly over the phone. I kept convincing myself I still had time to fix it. That sentence haunted me for weeks. Because most destruction doesn't happen through evil. It happens through delay. Through silence. Through people waiting too long to confront what they already know. I forgave him eventually. Not because he earned it. Because I was tired of carrying anger like inheritance. That's the part revenge stories rarely talk about. Exposure gives satisfaction, but healing requires release. One evening near sunset, Ethan and I sat together at the end of the lake dock wrapped in blankets while orange light reflected across the water.
No phones. No lawyers. No investigations.
Just us. And for the first time in years, my body finally stopped expecting disaster after happiness. Ethan looked over at me quietly. "What are you thinking about?" I watched the water move beneath fading light, then answered honestly. "My mother." He squeezed my hand gently. "I think she'd be proud of you." I smiled faintly. "Maybe." Then after a long silence, I added, "For surviving?" He shook his head softly.
No.
His voice lowered. For finally understanding you never had to disappear just to keep other people comfortable. That broke something open inside me. Because he was right. My entire life, I confused peace with self-erasure. I thought love meant endurance. I thought loyalty meant silence. Vanessa built her power around that misunderstanding. And once I stopped participating, everything collapsed. The wind moved softly across the lake. Somewhere behind us, the porch light flickered on automatically.
Home.
Actual home. Not performance. Not obligation. Not emotional debt. Home. I rested my head against Ethan's shoulder while darkness slowly covered the water. And in that quiet moment, I finally understood the real inheritance I protected wasn't money.
Or property.
Or family reputation. It was myself. And the most dangerous person in the room is the one who stays calm while everyone else performs. If this story reminded you that manipulation only survives in silence, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being part of Revenge Story HQ. Don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next revenge story.